Hello, my name's Diane and I'm a final year ordinand, and today's reading comes from the Book of Lamentations, starting at the first verse of the first chapter. How lonely sits the city that once was full of people. How like a widow she has become, she that was great among the nations. She that was a princess among the provinces has become a vassal. She weeps bitterly in the night, with tears on her cheeks. Among all her lovers she has no one to comfort her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They have become her enemies. Judah has gone into exile with suffering and hard servitude. She lives now among the nations and finds no resting place. Her pursuers have all overtaken her in the midst of her distress. The roads to Zion mourn, for no one comes to the festivals. All her gates are desolate. Her priests groan, her young girls grieve, and her lot is bitter. Her foes have become the masters, her enemies prosper, because the Lord has made her suffer for the multitude of her transgressions. Her children have gone away, captives before the foe. From daughter Zion has departed all her majesty. Her princes have become like stags that find no pasture. They fled without strength before the pursuer. Jerusalem remembers, in the days of her affliction and wandering, all the precious things that were hers in days of old. When her people fell into the hand of the foe, and there was no one to help her, the foe looked on mocking over her downfall. Jerusalem has sinned grievously, so she has become a mockery. All who honoured her despise her, for they have seen her nakedness. She herself groans and turns her face away. Her uncleanness was in her skirts. She took no thought of her future. Her downfall was appalling, with none to comfort her. O Lord, look at my affliction, for the enemy has triumphed. Enemies have stretched out their hands over all her precious things. She has even seen the nations invade her sanctuary, those whom you forbade to enter your congregation. All her people groan as they search for bread. They trade their treasures for food to revive their strength. Look, O Lord, and see how worthless I have become. Is it nothing to you, all you who pass by? The Book of Lamentations speaks to us of the time following the Babylonian conquest of Israel, the time of exile. Yet it's written from the perspective of those who were left behind, because the Babylonians only took into exile the important and powerful people in the nation of Israel. The rest of the people were left behind in the desolation of a city, without leaders, without direction, and seemingly without hope. This is a book of lament, a book which asks why they are so alone. Why have they been forgotten? Why have they been left behind? And as we walk the streets of our town centres today, we see the echoes of this in our own society. The streets are abandoned except for those who have nowhere else to go. The homeless who can't even beg anymore, as there is no one to beg from. Whilst they were looked after in the first lockdown, they seem to have been forgotten ever since. They're worthless, as verse 11 puts it. Is it nothing to you, all you who pass by? I find this reading really challenges me to think again about lockdown. However hard we found it, and I know many of us have, there are a lot of people who have found it far harder than we have. Just as those who went into exile found it hard, those left behind found it even harder. Without leadership, without the direction of those with a vision for where God was leading them, they could do nothing, and they were left to sell their most valuable possessions for food. So where do we see ourselves in this? What's the challenge for us today? And for me, that's about remembering when I return to the town centres next month, to look for those who've never left, those who had nowhere else to go, to notice them, and to make sure that with my actions and my care, I show them that they are more than nothing, and that their struggles have meaning for me.